Hey friends, welcome to the Raising Boys and Girls podcast. I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas.
And I'm Melissa Trevathan.
And we're so glad you've joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in.
Kim Stuart has always loved a good story, good writing, and a good laugh. She is also particularly fond of Dutch cheeses and dark chocolate. As a child, she would force her brother into playing the riveting game of library. Kim would write official-looking information with a red Sharpie, and Ryan would have the task of holding an inscribed stinky book. This game had a short lifespan as Ryan soon realized that there were neighborhood children who weren't into forced labor. Decades later, Stuart turned to writing to cope with the isolation and charming chaos of motherhood. 8 novels in, she continues to love both the power and the unfettered joy of a great story. In addition to her work as an author, she coaches aspiring writers alongside best-selling author Bob Goff, co-leads writing retreats, and hosts 2 podcasts, For Real with Kimberly Stewart and The Writing Room. We cannot wait for you to listen to this delightful conversation with our new friend, Kim. Kim, I've been so excited about getting to have this conversation for so long.
Oh, you are the dearest. Thank you for inviting me into this beautiful space. I'm honored and so excited to chat with you.
Well, we're so honored.
We have been counting down to this for quite some time. It's so fun.
Heavens.
It's actually happening.
Oh, it is just a delight to be here. Thank you.
Well, and for those of you who aren't watching the video, we have her amazing book just right between us. And David, what'd you say before
I can't tell you how fantastic your cover is.
Oh my goodness.
I automatically liked you when I saw the cover of that book.
That's good because I had a nervous breakdown when I saw
did?
it. So that's right. Totally. You know, it's a little bit of a rethink about the vulnerability when you have a photo of your 8th grade graduation on the cover of the book.
I was going to say, would you just start us by telling us about that outfit, maybe the whole scenario?
So the book is called Star for Jesus and Other Jobs I Quit. And it's about my own hope and process and continued process of holding on to this beautiful idea of grace. And I went to a Christian school through 8th grade, and that photo is from our 8th grade graduation. And I sure did have that pioneer-like dress, personal, custom made for me. Shout out to my mom's friend, Faith, who accommodated the 80s. But, when we started talking about this book cover, I sent a bunch of photos. There are a lot of memoir-like stories in this book. And so I sent some photos to my editor, thinking this would give her context. I didn't know it would be the principal image with my bangs. So.
Well, I was telling David about the notepad that I got that on one side says hold fast. Say what it says. You can
I need to get it. I think on one side, it's a checklist, 2 checklists. On one side, it says hold fast. Grace is on the way. And on the other side, it says let go. The bangs aren't worth it. And that's pretty much a capsule of my life.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Okay. Well, where we would love to start. It was so fun. It's so fun to know you and then read about you in reverse order. And your bio talks about how you're passionate about helping others tell great stories, which not even having been to your all's conferences, I would say from being on your podcast and then yours with my distant cousin, Bob Goff, that I certainly believe that's true. And so will you start off telling us a little about your story, about your family, how you found your way to what you're doing these days and all the things you're doing?
Oh, golly. It was a circuitous route. I live in Iowa with my husband, my brave and courageous and very kind and patient and every other adjective and superlative husband, Mark. We were college sweethearts and have been married 25 years. We have 3 kids, 2 in high school, 1 in college. And so your work and your podcast and your books, both of you, for years have been infusing courage in our house and helping us not feel alone, which I know is your heartbeat. So well done. And thank you. Really, it's such a joy to be able to look at your faces and tell you that. If you want to see the dog-eared copies of your books behind me on this shelf, we can tell that later. But we have been grateful to have a lot of years in the same place. We lived all over for about a decade in Costa Rica and Chicago and Minneapolis, lots of places, and then landed here. I grew up here. And then for writing, I started writing when I was pregnant with our second, I would say as a marriage helper, because Mark would come home every day. I was staying home with our eldest, Anna, who's now 21. And I had gone from being a high school teacher to being home. And I loved both of those things. I felt very confident that those were both things that I had loved in different seasons. And I wanted to be home with Anna. And also, I was very much not getting any extroverted help because she was an infant and she was not verbal. And so he would come home from work and I would frighten him with a lot of questions. He was in dental school at the time and the questions were dumb because dental school's a little lame, guys. So I would say things like, tell me all the multisyllabic words you heard today. And that was alarming to him and not like the woman he married. So he was the one who said, what about that crotchety old laptop in the closet? You've mentioned you want to write. One day. So one day became nap time and eventually preschool and kindergarten. Whenever the kids were occupied, I started to write things that I was learning, which turned into stories. And you're right, Sissy. I think the overarching theme has been that I love a good story. I love hearing people's stories. I love drawing them out. And then I like working with them on the paper sometimes to make sense of them. Mm-hmm. So both the novels and this new book, I think, are the core of it is good storytelling. Hopefully helps people laugh. Their shoulders go down when we laugh together. And then always pointing to grace. I look at early things that I was writing years and years ago, and grace has always been that thread that I keep kind of fussing with and needling because it's just such a life changer for me.
It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Okay, we want to ask you a question about balance. Folks, fasten your seatbelt while I tell you what I'm about to tell you. You have written 9 books, host 2 podcasts, For Real and The Writing Room with Bob Goff, speak, and are the parent of multiple kids. How? Seriously, as a mom, have you managed to find balance in all those things and keep this warm, delightful sense of humor that you have?
The trick.
That's kind of you. You really should always be interviewing my teenagers because they would tell you how warm and inviting I am at 10 p.m. Not my shining hour. I'm doing what everybody else is doing. You know what I mean? This is just a lot of what you just said. There have been seasons of each of those things. This happens to be a particularly abundant season. I'm using that word instead of chaotic and insane. Because they are all such great things. And we 3 know, you 2 more than I, there are lots of times in our lives where we don't get to pick what's on the list or what we're up against. And all of these things are really fun. And so I know that. And I've had seasons where that has not been the case. So as for balance, I don't know. Is that a real thing? I don't know. Right? Like, does that even exist? I think it's a give and a take. And there are some times when we're just going to have takeout a lot. And other times when we are at every single stinking jazz band competition that has ever been created in the history of the world. And we kind of go with it. I don't know. In our house, the only way this works is that if we are all talking to each other and making sure that we say out loud when we need help. That was a learning curve for me. As a mom, as a wife, as a friend, I'm fairly independent. And so I would say it took me an unfortunately long time to know that I need to say out loud to my family, this is hard, right? I look like this because I am tired. And I feel I'm talking like this because I need help. I tried to do all of the things by myself too long. Do not recommend.
Yes. such a good reminder.
Well, I do it sometimes better than others. And as my kids have grown, I think I've gotten better at inviting them into all of the potholes, right? Inviting them into, this is something that will require something of me. And that goes from a small thing to a big thing. So even on a day when I know I'm going to have a hard conversation, or I'm going to have to write a scene or a moment or work through something that I really would rather not. For a long time, I think I was trying to protect everyone in my house by their lives would continue. You'll never know. When my first book came out, when my kids are really little, the box appeared at the door. Mark opened it. Mark's a Uber cheerleader for me. Opened it on the kitchen island. And, the kids are like shorter than the kitchen island. He's like, look, Mom wrote this book. And they looked, one of them sucking their thumb, blink, blink. And they didn't believe him. So he turned it around and said, look at this photo. It's your mom. Which, by the way, I'd scheduled to have taken between breastfeeding sessions. Okay. I was really protecting their time. And they just didn't know. And we laugh about that now. But I think I waited too long to let them into, this is what I'm up to.
Yeah.
And I want to be involved in what they're up against. So why wouldn't I say that out loud? I don't know if it's just moms. I watch Mark do this too. I think we've both gotten better at saying to our kids, today was hard. This relationship is hard. This spot on the road is hard. And that actually, instead of hurting them or like taking some veil off that we don't want, I think it empowers them and gives them some courage because they realize, oh my gosh, my parents are doing this too. There isn't some magical moment when everything fits. They are old and weary with age marks on their cheeks and still needing help. And that's a good thing.
Yes. I love that so much. Well, your new book, which you mentioned the title, Star for Jesus and Other Jobs I Quit. It's an amazing title. And we want to hear the origin story of the title and what you're hoping. I mean, I think people probably already have a sense of what they're going to get from it, just hearing the grace with which you speak. But would you say both of those things, how you got to the title and what you hope folks gain from the book?
Yeah. As you both know, when you write a book, you suggest a title and then it's kind of up for grabs. But this one was really mine. This was from me.
You must have sold a lot more books than we have in our lifetimes.
Oh no, this was a unique process, Sissy. I haven't always been listened to. The origin story is that when I was in elementary school at our church, I attended a program that was kind of like lame Christian Girl Scouts. Getting ready to offend a few people, so hold on. There were wonderful things happening in this church program. Okay, I learned a lot of scripture. I learned a lot of things that I needed for my whole life. But I also somehow picked up the idea that my time with Jesus was relegated to some box checking. I'm a firstborn female, so I really love to check boxes. I will make items on my list post accomplishing the item just so I can check it out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We're both firstborn. We get it.
Okay, great.
We get it.
Love to check a box.
Yes.
Which is so great in so many spaces, but probably not when it comes to communion with Jesus. He's not really looking for me to tap dance for him. But somehow I picked that up, that this was a performative thing. And so the height of this Girl Scout program was to become a star. And you better believe I did. Okay. I got the satin cape. Yep.
Satin
and
cape.
The crown and the candlelit ceremony and the paper, and thought that somehow again, I do not think my pastor was saying this. I don't think my teachers were saying this. I think I just picked it up. I think it was Martin Luther that said the default of the human heart is religion. We love to make rules and boxes and make things tidy. And to me, checking a box felt tidier than some idea of surrender, and a lot tidier than the idea of this unmerited, beautiful gift of grace that I didn't have to earn. That didn't make sense to me because I earned everywhere else in my life. So the idea of the book is, we do not need to be a star for Jesus. He's not looking for our best tap dance. He's looking for us. He just wants us. I think I understood that a little bit more when I had kids. The idea of one of my kids crawling up on my lap and wanting to hang out with me was clarifying, because I had somewhere picked up that to be with God, I really needed to spit shine my shoes and have my teeth brushed and have my heart clean and all of my behavior in order. I would never expect that of my kids. I would never say to my toddler, listen, you've got some cilantro in your teeth. You're going to have to come back. I would never do that. And somehow I was importing that to my walk and experience with Jesus. So it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride, and all of the swings have been dependent on my own driving, not him. It's been me. The subtitle of the book is Rediscovering the Grace That Sets Us Free. What about that? I mean, I don't know why I have pushed away freedom so many times. It's mine for the taking. I give it to my kids more readily than to me. And I'm still learning about that. So beautiful. It's such a beautiful gift, this amazing grace. And I have impoverished it many times in my own life.
Okay, we want to talk about that amazing subtitle, which we absolutely love as much as the title. And Kim, we are talking to more defeated, discouraged parents than any other time in all these decades of doing this work. And so as you think about that idea of rediscovering the grace that sets us free, what encouragement in rediscovering that grace would you specifically give to parents?
Oh, man. I mean, I am the absolute furthest thing from, is it furthest or farthest? I should ask an editor. Furthest thing from an expert in this situation. I am a co-laborer and compatriot and walking on the same road. I would say two things that I have picked up along the way. We are really intent on making grace into math. And I'll tell you what I mean. I am, maybe this is just me, but I either like to add to it and say to God, okay, great. Thanks so much for that finished work on the cross, except for you've got about 50 yards to go. I'm going to help you with that. I'm going to be swimming madly under the surface to help you love me more, accept me more. I want to merit this. So that's one way I add. I've got some grace math addition. And then I also subtract. And I take it away from, I take this idea of grace and make it smaller and decide these people deserve this from me and others do not. So I'm constantly with this funky abacus trying to make the math work, and there is no math. And that is absolutely happening in our parenting all the time. I am so hard on myself. I am hard on my children, not always from a place of kindness, but more from how can this possibly work if I am abundant in the grace that I give to myself and to my kids. So first, for sure, would be such a deep breath with parents saying, you have all the grace you need. When God talks about grace, he talks about it in like extravagant language. Lavishing is a word he uses. Extravagant, grace upon grace, right? And he pairs that with weakness. That his strength is made perfect in our weakness. So if we're looking to be uber parent, it will, first of all, will not happen. It will absolutely be so disappointing to us and to others. And it will set you up to push away grace, to give the Heisman to grace. I think it's such a beautiful gift, and we have to have open hands for it. So first to ourselves, right? I have so many friends who are young moms, and I watch how they have to ingest or choose to ingest on social media these pretend examples of fake parenting, perfect parenting. And I do want to take their phones and toss them in the Raccoon River in Des Moines, Iowa, because that's a no-win. That's a no-win. So maybe quieting the noise, boxing out, like using some elbows to have time by yourself with Jesus, even if it's 5-10 minutes, and asking him, who do you think I am? Remind me who I am to you, that I am beloved, that I was fought for and purchased, that there's nothing I can do in my home or my relationships today that is apart from your love. I cannot separate myself from you. I mean, man, I wish I would have started more days like that when my kids were little, because you are depleted. And reminding yourself of who you are is a great start. And then toward our kids, I was a slow study for this. I remember going to a talk one time and hearing about a way of relating to our kids that shifted things for me. And I went home and gathered our kids around. I was actually at a lake cabin, not with him. And so the 3 kids were there with me. Thea, the youngest, was real little, but Anna had been around for a while. She's probably 7 or 8. And then Mitch was about 4. And I remember sitting on the couch and looking at them, gathering them to have a conversation and apologizing. And I said, I learned this morning that I think I have been more intent on making you do what I think is right than listening to who you are and asking you about what's on your heart and what's on your brain. And I have forgotten to come alongside you. I've been over you. And Anna, who absolutely has the strongest will, like her mother. And we laugh about that now, that she nearly killed us in her early years. Just tough. She would wait the longest to soften, and it was just a harder time with her. She now is the absolute most tender and sweet and strong girl. We marvel at the woman she's choosing to become. But at that time, she would have been the last one to let her shoulders relax. She came out with dukes up, and I apologized, and she burst into tears. And that was grace. That was grace on that couch that she extended to me, because I was not nailing it. I had forgotten empathy. I had definitely gotten much more worried about the fit in Target on the floor with everyone watching, and less worried about saying, what's going on? What's in your heart today? What are you thinking about? Just went straight to making it shinier. That was a turning point for me in my parenting. I physically remember thinking I need to physically approach my kids with my hands open and my shoulders down instead of my finger out. And I mean, come on, that's how God treats me. He doesn't come with the finger out and shaking a wagging finger telling me what I've done wrong. He absolutely loves me too much to let me stay in my muck and my mire. I feel the same about my kids. But my first question has become, when I'm doing this the way I want to, tell me what you're thinking about. Tell me how you're feeling about this. I can see you're super upset. Help me understand what that feels like. And sometimes if the emotion is really high, I say, let's return to this because I need to think. I think that was one thing that I had to learn. I don't have to parent in the second all the time.
Yes.
I can give myself a little bit of grace. There is an on and an off ramp here.
Yes.
So to the parents who are just inundated with so much, right? We've been through a lot in the last years. I wish I could hug every single one of you and tell you, deep breath, friend, for you and for your kids. We've got one day at a time. You are not supposed to be perfect. You are not going to fix it all, but you do have a God who sees you and knows your name and the names of your sweet kids.
I feel like as parents are listening, I think their shoulders are dropping. Oh, that's just beautiful. So. Grace and hope feel like themes from who you are and certainly from this book. And I love the letting go of the grip we have on who we believe we should be and having to meet expectations. And I want to read something. I'm so enjoying reading this. already. And I wanted to read something I read that I loved. And I love this section. Fear was oxygen for my war with my body. The battle raged best when I fed it with regular doses of fear. I feared I wasn't good enough, not this version of myself. I needed to work, often feverishly, until the version matched what I'd arbitrarily decided was the ideal. I wasn't strong enough here, pretty enough there, fit enough here, small enough there. And that fight for faux perfection bled into every other fissure too. My relationships, my lack of relationships, my grades, my achievement, even the time I spent trying to hear from God. Everything depended on me. But the problem was that hardly any of it obeyed me. And though I might not have had the words for it, I was scared. Fear ran the show in my head and heart, and my body became the one thing I could manhandle into submission. What saved me then and saves me now is that grace will not play nice with fear. It refuses to speak that dialect because that dialect is full of things that aren't true. The very nature of grace shouts from glorious rooftops that we are not in control. Nothing obeys us, and hallelujah for that anyway. We are not trustworthy when it comes to deciding when we are good enough. The price for grace is firm and immovable and paid in full. There's no good enough about it. I mean, I could keep reading. I love this so much. And I love the stories. You just have fabulous, hilarious stories littered through this book. So will you tell us about another time, which you just did in such a beautiful way, but will you tell us another time that some of that truth started to seep in from a story of your own life?
Oh, golly. I mean, I feel like I should know this stuff by now. Even hearing you read it, I'm like, yeah, I need to hear that today. Who wrote that? How did she know that? Oh, let's see. My parents were, they are a steadfast and they are a masterclass of grace for me. And I know more with years what a gift that was. And is. They were really quick to apologize. My dad is quite a character. You get a little sense of him in the book. And just a larger than life personality. And he oftentimes, I have very clear memories from when we were really little of after things would go awry in our house, give him a couple hours or an hour, and he would come to me or come to my brother and my sister and say, hey, I didn't do that right. That was wrong. So I guess the first example of grace for sure, before I had any words for it, was just watching my parents say they were sorry.
Yes.
I've definitely tried to do that with my kids, sometimes better than others. They for sure know that they have a very flawed mother. And so far, that seems to be going okay because they're noticing that that Jesus can, shimmy the edges off of that, but then I'm still fully dependent on him to make any sense of all of those flaws and make them move in the right direction. When you ask about another time for grace, I mean, in Iowa, we would say my whole ding dang life. Is that a word you use where you guys are from? Is that a Tennessee thing? My whole ding dang life is littered with those stories. And a lot of them are in the book. Some of the stories have shifted according to season, what I learned from them. I'm thinking of one very important story in our family life. My dad, that larger than life personality, when I was 2, he prayed this very raucous prayer and said to God, well, I've gone to church for a long time. I'm not seeing the point of it. So either you show me that you're real or I'm out of here. Super type A, super efficient. Didn't see any reason why he should keep rotting in a pew if there's nothing going on. I think we all get to that time, right? When we're not in our family of origin and we decide, is this worth it? Is there anything here? Or is this just that I'm putting on a nice dress or a suit and then deciding I'm going to play along? And 2 weeks after he prayed that prayer, I was run over by a car in our neighbor's front driveway. if you've had a 2-year-old, you know how quickly things can go sideways. My mom had gone inside to meet my dad for lunch. He'd come home for lunch, and I somehow toddled out of the backyard around to the front of our neighbor's house, and they heard her crying. So they ran around. My dad is a dentist, a lot of dental people in my family. He knows about head injuries, completely ignored that, scooped up his baby girl. The tire had passed over my head, and he put me in the car with my mom, and we went to the hospital. And it turned out that I had a bilateral skull fracture. So my skull was fractured in 2 places. And my dad, who had had all the answers about 2 weeks prior, started to call everybody he knew to ask for prayer. The doctors weren't super hopeful. That's not an injury that you want. But the short version of the story is that 5 days later, I was released from the hospital, never had children's Tylenol even. I was healed. And the neurologists didn't know what to do with me, still don't. Actually, I spoke at a church not long ago, and an older woman came up to me. She was using a cane, and she said, "My husband was your neurologist."
No.
Yep. And she said, "He never talked about his patients, but he talked about you." And that had been 40 years. So we're still shaking our heads about that. My dad cannot tell this story without weeping. It's been over 4 decades. And the reason is because the God of grace spoke his language. My dad would probably not have responded to a candlelit service. I would. He wasn't looking for, liturgy or a contemplative retreat. That would not have worked for my dad. His personality and language was very in your face and very bold. And I see the tenderness of God all over that story because of how he talked to my dad. And through that, I see grace, right? That's the beauty of this. When we're willing to listen and start looking for these things, gosh, it becomes a megaphone. And only the God we serve can figure out how to do that in a way that we all understand, right? He was so tender with my dad, who was so obnoxious. And if you're listening, Dad, I love you. Still a little obnoxious. He worked with that. Right? He knows that when we were talking before about how God knows our name, this is not a general grace. It's not a universal, go in peace, good luck. He knows our names. Names are all over the Bible. I kind of giggle when he says the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I mean, we've made that into, that's so familiar to us, but it's like, the God of Kim and Sissy and David. These are just normal dudes. But he knows our names. He doesn't take that out of the story, and he didn't for my dad. And our family for generations will be grateful for that.
Thank you for sharing that.
I mean, every time you speak, I want to give a benediction at the end. I just want to say, and to him who can do, I did.
Amen.
It is so beautiful. My goodness.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
You guys are way too kind.
Well, we're not going to have a benediction because that would mean we're at the end, and we've got lots more we want to talk to you about. Okay. So this season of our podcast, we are talking about the ages and stages of kids. And would love to ask you, just in your parenting journey, do you have a favorite stage and why?
Why are you guys asking me these questions? You are the experts. You write about this. I put embarrassing photos of myself on covers, and you're asking me about parenting. Am I the one to ask? I say no. Oh, man. Dicey. This is a dicey protocol here. I don't have a favorite stage, which would have annoyed me so highly when I had younger children and felt like all old moms couldn't see me anymore, right? I'd see them in the church lobby or in the mall or in Target, and older moms would say, "Oh, go so fast. It's just it's going to fly by." This is when my kids are like ripping things and snot's flying and they're crying and saying an inappropriate word. It goes so fast. Oh, no, it doesn't, Marvis. It does not go fast. So if I had heard that earlier, if I'd heard myself say I don't have a favorite stage, I probably would have rolled my eyes. But it's actually true. All of them have their own perks. I am counterculturally going to say that having teenagers and young adults is fantastic. I've loved it. Of course, there are bumps. Yes. And sleep is so different because they don't really. And I used to make them, and now I cannot. The things we talk about are rough, and they usually start at 11 p.m. when I'm falling asleep. And someone will come in the darkness and say, Mom, are you awake? Yes, I am. Don't believe the visuals that I was snoring and it's dark. I was awake and thinking about how we could talk about, sexual orientation at 11 and what do we feel about it. So that has shifted. Availability looks different. When our kids are little, there's not a lot of pretense. They just assume you're available. Teenagers will not ask me that. They won't say out loud, hey, is this a good time? Right? And if there is anything telling them it's not, they're quicker to retreat. So I've had to Mark and I have just learned a little bit of a different language for that. We really don't know what we're doing. We let our kids know all the time, you are our first people that we've raised. And so we are very much novices here. I've clung to prayer in a way that I never have before because, those conversations, those questions feel bigger. The stakes are higher, and I can't fill that. I can't fill the buckets, right? Sitting down to, a princess movie is not going to fix anything anymore.
Right.
So I'm grateful for, if there's one thing that I would encourage folks to cultivate from a very early age, and we did this so imperfectly, but when we were mindful of this, it made such a difference. It still does. Nothing can scare us that our kids will say. Even when they were little, if your face can say, even inside when you are absolutely freaking out at whatever they're bringing up, our kids all go to public school. They heard about and learned about and are in things that I did not have to hear about till later. I cannot freak out with my face because they will be nervous that my own emotional health is related to what they are saying.
Yes.
Right. And they instinctively will want to protect me from that. So there have been stages when I'm sure my kids were so irritated that I would say, oh, let's talk about that. Can I hear more? Tell me more. I would follow them in the house. And, the two girls are much more emotive and ready to chat. David, you are the expert on the son. And he has his own just unbelievable strengths. And it takes him a longer time to let this out, but it does. If I'm there, if I continue to be there, oftentimes in a car or when we don't have to look at each other face to face, it does happen. And so I just asked my kids the other day, how are you feeling about the amount of persistence that I have in waiting for you to talk to me? They kind of looked at me like, you know what? We gave up a long time ago because you are a dog with a bone. But again, trying not to look alarmed. This actually was really good parenting advice. One time my friend said to me, when you have teenagers, do not believe their face. I thought that was very curious. She was like, they're going to look very irritated with you and they don't even know what they're doing with their face. And I will react emotionally and be like, why are you looking at me like that? That is disrespect on your face. And they haven't even connected that yet. So turning that on myself, let my face say what is true, which is I love you, period. Full stop. I love you. I love you. I love you. I'm on your team. I love you. Let's do this together. So maybe teenagers are my favorite stage. I don't know. And young adult. Now I have a young, not living with us person, and she is amazing. The things that you get to talk about are phenomenal. So maybe now.
David's there too. Very similar.
Amazing. Exhausting. right? Like it's a different kind of tired.
Yes. But I love young adults too. They're so fascinating. It's so fun to see them find their way in the world. And
yes.
Yeah, I love it too. It's neat to hear you talk about.
Yeah, you won't hear that everywhere. I mean, a lot of folks will say, bear down, Mavis, who said I would long for toddler years, was usually the same person who's like, wait till they're teenagers with a snarl.
Yes.
And I would just encourage parents not to listen to that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to have dread coming into this. Of course, there will be serious bumps and bruises. If you did not have Sissy and David at the ready in your ears, it would be even harder. But there are wonderful resources and there are wonderful people speaking to you in this time. You're not by yourself. And they can be just the most hilarious, goofy, wonderful presences in your house. Yes. And they will also drive you bonkers, both and.
I love that. And that was my next question was, what do you feel like you're learning from parenting from teenage and college age kids? And I think what you are doing, it's so obvious in the way that you talk about them that it seems like you're learning is to stay open to any time and to be present with them and to be persistent. But what I love about what you're saying, Kim, is I think it's so easy, and I tend to think it's especially easy for us as women. I feel like when we're being present and persistent, often we're also intense. And the more anxious we are, the more intense we are. And you have this beautiful sense of humor that even that you could ask them that question about, what do you think about your mother's persistence? You do it in such a funny way that I think with adolescence is more disarming than defeating. You know, I feel like they feel so afraid of intimacy in some ways. And so when we can be funny and disarming, so I'm answering your question for you. Those are some of the things that I'm learning from you as you're talking about raising them. But would you add anything else?
Humor is the superpower.
Yes.
And I hesitate to say that in case, I have some friends who are just magnificent parents and not funny people. They would feel very weird injecting humor.
Yes.
And I would say this is not about telling jokes. It's about being self-deprecating. And over that is humility. Yes. Teenagers have an antenna that is tuned to a frequency called, are you lying? And they pick it up. If they think you are being fake or false or saccharine or sugary or bow tying in any way, outie. They are not into it. So the only way I avoid that is by telling the truth. And sometimes it's super painful. Oh my goodness. Oh man, so many fires that I have set for my own self. And then I have to take the fire extinguisher and say, that was so off, right? I said that because I'm tired. I don't really believe that about me or about you or about what we're doing here. But I don't know. I think for teenagers more than anybody, humility cuts everything to the quick. They feel like they're supposed to know stuff. And so if I pile on and make them feel like they should, that just doesn't go very well. It goes so much better if you say, oh man, I can see why you would think that. Let me tell you how I crashed and burned this week. That's just, it's a better plan because it's a more honest plan.
Yes.
But I don't know how to do any of it without prayer. And also I'll probably listen to this later and throw popcorn at my speakers and say, what are you talking about? You just totally failed on a Tuesday. So shush. These are all aspirational things, guys.
Okay. If we're going to avoid Mavis recommendations, what would you say is some of the best parenting advice you've been given over the years?
Oh, for sure. Apologize quickly and often. That's probably number one. And again, that stems from humility. Our kids are not being taught a lot about humility organically in the world. They are more encouraged to fake it till they make it and encouraged to pay attention to what everyone else is saying about them and to have concrete answers that they can share without reservation and somehow not be chastised or punished or canceled for. I mean, it is a situation that they face every day leaving our homes. So if our house is the place where they can see people, see their mom and dad being honest and apologizing quickly and being ready to learn and being curious, that's a big deal. And then I wish I would have learned earlier that there is no template. It's so discouraging for a firstborn female. Really wanted a template. I really wanted everyone to obey the same idea. And every kid is so different. So my mom gave me great advice one time. This is very much teenage. She's given me a lot of good advice over the years, but I remember she told a story about my brother, who is just hilarious and was a little bit of a stinker in high school, as was I and my sister as well. I've apologized for the years 1992 through 1998 to my parents, if that tells you how long my personal stage was. But my brother was in a stage, I hope he doesn't mind me telling this too late, where at home he was such a stinker and just not super easy. And I know this, I've been through this, I've done this, and I've also watched this in our own house. You know, coming home, often from church, actually, and everything would get real ugly. All the unkind things that we save up in church, we get to unleash in our family. And she was at church one morning and someone came up to her and said, I mean, this is a particular low spot. And this person said, you know what? I just so appreciate your son. He is the first person to raise his hand to help. He clears all the things out of the room, sets up the chairs. He's always reaching out to someone who's hurting and asking how they are, and just such generosity of spirit from him. And she said, I remember looking at your dad and thinking, she does not know who she's talking about. This must be Darren, a different child. And she thinks I'm Darren's mom. So, and of course, it was absolutely Ryan. And my mom told me later, our hope was that your public self and your private self eventually would merge. That when you are at home and being the absolute pain in the tusher, this is a safe space for you to try that out. But actually, when you are out in the world and people are seeing who you are and commenting and saying, gosh, she's on the right track, that's who you're becoming. That's who you will eventually be. I have thought of that so many times parenting, that the public and the private, we're merging, we're getting those things closer together. Home is the place where you can let it all hang out, and some of it's not going to be very great. But what you're trying out and testing out in the world, that's where we're headed. That's where we're headed. We all need to be patient for that day.
Yes.
It's a good one. Good job, Mom. Mama Patty. She knows stuff.
Okay, so for all the people who are listening and think, how do I get that book? I cannot wait to read more of her stuff. Will you talk about where folks can find and follow all the things you're doing?
Oh, well, the book is available where all books are available these days. So online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. We just found out happily that Target picked it up.
Yay!
And so it will be in Target stores. So that's super fun. And then I hang out on Instagram begrudgingly often, but it's kimberly.stewart.writes. And I would just love to hear from you. For your listeners, first of all, let us all send fruit baskets to Sissy Goff and to her compatriot David, because what would we do without you people? Number one. And number two, you are just not alone. You're not alone. I see you. I see you as you're walking for 5 minutes by yourself before someone else needs you. 5 is probably generous. You're just not alone on this road. I hope that you don't feel that, and instead know that there is a cloud of witnesses and co-laborers, co-walkers, runners, limpers with you. Don't start to think you're doing this by yourself. That's where the danger comes. Just know you are not alone in this. We are cheering you on like mad.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to turn our final question into a forced invitation so we can get this on the record. Okay.
I love this.
Okay.
So when we come to Iowa or you come to Nashville, and we'll insist on sharing a meal with you.
Yes.
Inviting ourselves here on the record.
Please let it be.
Okay. All right. You heard it.
gosh.
We've got it recorded.
I did.
You're stuck now. When you think better
Good.
of it, I'm going to have it on my phone. And when I come up to you, you said I could.
When we share that meal, will it be queso or guac? And what kind of taco are we going to share?
100% guac.
Okay.
And I'm going to say some sort of al pastor, some kind of pork. I am from Iowa, guys. We're very clear on how we feel about pork. And actually, Mark and I, since we lived in Latin America, we've gotten real fussy about tacos.
Yes.
And love a great pork taco. So that's what I would say. Maybe steak. I'm open for whatever. If you guys are there, portobello mushrooms. I do whatever. Just as long as you guys are at the table, I am in.
Oh, us too. I cannot wait for that time. Thank you, friend. Thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with the world. We are so grateful for you.
You are a delight and a wonder. Thank you for saying yes to this. Yep. Everything you said was true.
Yeah.
I am so grateful for you both. And guacamole is coming down the pike. We have said it. Let it happen.
Wait.
Cannot wait. David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible.
Amanda Young, our operations manager.
Chris Starrett, our engineer and producer.
Our management team at KCH.
And we are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.